BNN had on a guy yesterday, a global or not yesterday, last week, a global strategist, and he said the Canadian market is the biggest real estate bubble in history.
Yeah, I saw that.
Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So do you think that we can pump air in it for another 3-4 years?
Yeah. And they'll do everything they possibly can to keep the system going. And I don't want to sound like it's a conspiracy. It's this economic system that we have set up that we are, it's essentially our plan. And so it's better to have a plan than no plan. And we're talking about, if you own a home, the bank still owns you. If you rent an apartment, the bank still owns that as well. You go to buy a car, most people, the bank owns that as well. And most everything is financed right now. And so that is our economic system. And that is why we're incentivized to not have lower prices. Because if the banks fail, our economies fail. And so they want, I say they, but the whole system is predicated on ever increasing real estate prices. Because if they go down, then the banks are so leveraged that they might be, for example, 20 to 1, like they were back in the U.S., the last recession in the U.S. If the real estate prices go down 10%, then those banks are insolvent. And now it's a little bit different here. We have better controls, a better system in place. But of course, that's what banks do. They lever up, they create money, and they send it out. And so if you get a reduction in the value of real estate, banks will begin to be insolvent, and therefore our whole system is insolvent. And so we have a lot of room to run, because once development starts picking up, once the interest rates settle down, I think that we've probably peaked. I don't know for sure, obviously, and I got caught on the last interest rate hike, so I don't know. I have no crystal ball. But my sense is that we've probably peaked, and they want to push the interest rates to the level that they possibly can without breaking the system. Then they'll pull back from there. And then with construction, with the economy, I think things will really ramp up, and we could see another healthy amount of appreciation up to the peak around, if history is to repeat, it should be around 2026, 2027. And typically leading up, this is the most explosive phase. You can get double-digit growth year over year leading up to it, which we had again in Alberta early 2000s, and that very well could happen again.
Maybe just very quickly explain to people what that cycle is. And we'll get into more of it.
So it's at 18.6. So it's 4 years of recession. So that's after the peak. That's where the banks really are in trouble. And typically, liquidity is pumped into the banks to try and shore up their balance sheets. Because with the reduction in the values of real estate, the banks are technically insolvent. And so they need to be shored up. So money is, just like they did in 2008 in the U.S. financial crisis, they pumped the money in to try and make the banks solvent again. And so once that's kind of shored up, things are stabilized again, you start to have some growth. That's typically 6 to 7 years of growth. Why is that 6 to 7 years? There's different reasons why, or where it could be. No one knows exactly for sure, but that it often is tied in with the business cycle of every 7 years people talk about. So you have 7 years of growth. There's something in the middle after about 7 years where it destabilizes the economy. Typically, liquidity is pumped back into the system again. And there's a couple years of that. I'll outline the numbers better thereafter, because it's not like this month at this time things are going to happen. It's a guideline to follow, but of course things can happen within it. So there's some type of wobble like we had with the COVID lockdown. Essentially, the whole world was locked down. So therefore, the economy, people were scared. What they do, they pump liquidity into the system to make sure that there's money for the banks to lend, that people have money, etc. They get that money out there. It restabilizes the system. Takes a couple of years. People realize things are okay. and we go to another 5 to 7 year phase of growth, that is typically the more stronger point, because people will see, oh, we just had a recession, the government bailed us out, we're safe, we know what we're doing this time it's different. There's more euphoria, people see opportunity to go in, flip a house, make $500,000 like they were in the mid 2000s. They bring all their friends in and everybody's all in. That's how you get right now. There's a lot of liquidity sitting on the sidelines, people just waiting for things to do, what to do. There's a lot of money waiting to bid up prices. Once they realize things are strong, they'll come back in. So you come back into the second half of the cycle, that's another 5 to 7 years. For a total of 14 years, you get that peak, and then you start have a destabilization of the system. That's another 4 years, and the cycle starts again.
So how are you planning to time? We're just getting to the ideally explosive phase.
Yeah, I was talking about this morning. I think typically we're getting into the explosive phase, but I think it was slightly distorted because as soon as COVID happened, we brought interest rates down so low that we saw a bit of the explosive phase a little bit earlier. As we saw right after COVID, they reduced interest rates to almost nothing. And what happened? The real estate market took off. In the bigger Toronto and Vancouver, prices, you're having significant year-over-year price gains. And then they realized that this was completely overdone. And so they realized that the system wasn't as in bad a shape as they thought, so they jacked the rates back up. So it kind of it threw off the cycle slightly in that you typically wouldn't have these extremes, but I think now they're kind of balancing that out, finding where they need to be to allow growth and not crush the system. And I think once they settle out in 2024, construction picks up, massive immigration continues, I think we're going to see a very significant explosive phase. And it's called, the last 2 years is called the winner's curse phase, because people actually, so to be honest, like myself, we bought real estate 2006, 2007, thinking we're going to be millionaires just because we bought a house, put some paint on it and sold it, right? And so it's really real for me because I have been in the explosive phase where it's mania and everyone is just running around buying real estate. And many people, probably including myself at that time, shouldn't be. And I got caught at the tail end of that last cycle. And it probably why this book resonated with me, because when you get to these phases, it's mania, and anyone is buying any real estate for whatever they can get their hands on. And that's how you get that last 2 years of just explosive growth that is completely unsustainable. And then you start again.